Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode. Today, we are joined by Rising Club, the Mock Trial Club, with the founder and president, Abigail Francisco. Welcome, Abby. It's great to have you here today.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah, so among being a Link leader and an AP student, the National Honor Society's secretary, and you also took on the immense role of starting your own club about law last year and what it's like to be in the courtroom. So why did you start the Mock Trial Club, and what is it like building the club up from the ground?
Yeah, so I joined moot court in sophomore year, and that was really where I found my love of law. Because going into high school, I didn't really know what I was going to do, but I really loved moot court and loved learning about the legal system. And then at the end of the year, my mom was kind of asking, like, oh, why does your school not have a mock trial team? And so she brought the idea up to me. We had researched mock trial and kind of watched some of those mock trial videos on YouTube. And I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really fun. I wanted to try it out. And because we didn't have one on campus, I was like, well, why don't we just start one up? And so I got in contact with my friend and now my vice president, Sanjitha, who was also in moot court. And we started up the club, and she got in contact with Robert Hoshiyama and my second vice president. And we decided to put in the forms and everything last year, and that's how we got started. And I think just as for starting the club from the ground up, there was just so much specifically that was mock trial related that was pretty difficult getting it started, because one thing about mock trial is it requires a teacher and attorney coach, or it requires at least a teacher coach to sign on. And so we spent 3 weeks running around campus to multiple teachers trying to get someone who would sign on, because I know most clubs you just need an advisor. But for us, it was you had to, if you're a teacher who's signing on for mock trial, you get a stipend from the district, because it's under the assumption that you're going to be helping coach the club. And so we had a lot of teachers that were like, oh, I don't want to have that responsibility. I don't know if I can coach a mock trial team. And so we just kept getting rejected over and over and over again. And eventually we were like, okay, there's no one on campus who's going to help us this year. We got to just settle. So Robert reached out to Mr. Kilby, who signed on as our teacher advisor and our teacher coach in the mock trial competition system, just so that we had a teacher coach. But Kilby doesn't have experience in mock trial, and obviously doesn't have the time to be coaching a mock trial team with everything else he's doing on campus. So Kilby just signed on just so that we would have a teacher coach and could be running. So what that meant for our club was I had to learn the ins and outs of mock trial and kind of take on the role of coach. And so yeah, I was studying all of the case packets, rule books, and that's how we got our club running from the ground up.
And that's a little different from moot court, right? Since you need specifically a coach.
I think moot court also has a coach, but the thing with moot court was they already had coaches. So they already had Mr. Coover and Miss Carl, and they had an attorney coach. So with us, we had no resources and no coaches, and so that was us scrambling last year trying to find someone.
And have you guys did a competition without a coach?
Yeah, so our entire first year was without coaches, and it was just solely based off my knowledge of mock trial, all the research I had done and brought to my team. And so thankfully we were able to compete to the best of our abilities. We scored pretty well. We ranked higher than 6 other teams in the competition, which is pretty good considering that all the other teams had at least a teacher coach and we didn't have any. And we won one of our rounds 3-0, so that was pretty good. And I would say one of the difficulties of not having a coach during that competition was there's a moment in the trial where the judge tells the teams, you have a moment to go and confer with your coaches. It was a little disheartening watching the other teams excitedly go and go talk to their coach real quick, and my team would just kind of stay still. So the difference between that and this year, where we did have teacher and attorney coaches, it was definitely very different.
Yeah, so would you say this year it's definitely a lot more, I guess, supportive with having a coach? And additionally, you guys did People v. Clark, which is a first-degree murder case. Did you do that with or without a coach?
Yeah, so this year we had coaches. Our attorney coach this year, who his name is Mr. Kirk Rimmer. He was one of our scoring judges last year during our competition. And I think Kilby had mentioned to him that we didn't have an attorney coach. And Kirk was like, "Oh, I'm retiring next year. I'll come and coach." And so he's been here this year. He came to every single one of our meetings, and he's been amazing. He was super helpful, helping us with our objections, helping us phrase our questions, and it's been really helpful, especially for like me, since last year, anytime I had a question, I had to turn to like the internet, which isn't always helpful. But to like this year, if I had a question, I knew I had someone to ask. And it's the same thing with our teacher coach, Mr. Coover, who took on mock trial this year, as well as moot court. And when he was here for our meetings, he was also super helpful, and I could ask him because he actually passed the bar, so he's like technically attorney, and so he knows the ins and outs of law as well, and so I could ask both of them questions. It just felt so much more supportive this year, knowing that I had people to like ask any other questions I had, and people who would like be there at meetings, and it wouldn't just be me. So while I was still leading my team this year, and while I was still coaching a lot of it, it didn't feel as alone as I did last year.
And you take on the immense role of being the lead prosecution and defense attorney, right?
Yes.
Which is probably a really big role from last year, especially since you didn't really have much help from coaches about that. And additionally, you've also had recent successes at the Library Galleria, where a lot of your members were able to receive awards, and you even hosted a social event at Punch Bowl. What contributes to the success of your club, whether that be something you specifically do as the president or something you notice about the environment of your club?
Yeah, so what I love about mock trial is just the community that it ends up being. A lot of our members at the beginning of the year, it's super quiet, and people are kind of unsure, and they're a little bit intimidated by the fact that it's like a law club, and they're like, "Oh, we're gonna be in a courtroom," and they tend to be really nervous. And then as soon as like that first round is done, there's an immediate shift, and you could like feel it, where everyone is like, "We just did that," and like we just did that as a team. And it's been so great like watching everyone like come to like the competition super excited. Everyone's like supporting each other, and it's been great. I was super excited about the awards ceremony this year that you mentioned, because last year I was the only person on my team that received an award, which was cool. I liked liked getting the top attorney award, but seeing the list this year and seeing that let's see, like Sophie also got a top attorney award, and Sanjitha got team MVP, and two of our witnesses, Winlin and Vincent, received top witness awards. I was super excited. I made sure that like my entire team was gonna come to the awards ceremony this year. Last year it was just me, and so this year I was like, okay guys, we're gonna do this as a team, and we're also gonna celebrate with our team dinner social right before it. And everyone loved that social. That one was entirely like my mom's doing, because my mom obviously, as I mentioned before, mock trial was like my mom's idea. So she's been super supportive of me doing all of this for mock trial, and so
shout out Mrs. Francisco.
Yeah, shout out Mrs. Francisco. She's great. Both of my parents, they really love mock trial, and they're like always supporting me from the background, but they're also like supporting my team whenever they come to our competitions. They're like at every single one. They're like, "Hey, I like that teammate over there. Who's that one that played that one with this? She was really good." And I was like, "Yeah," and I'll tell them about all my teammates and things. So the Punch Bowl social, that was like 3 weeks of like planning on like my mom's part. She was like contacting multiple different restaurants trying to get people, especially because we had like a group of like 40 with our teammates and their parents who wanted to come along and come to the award ceremony. And so she eventually contacted like Punch Bowl, and that was actually a really good space, because we had a space all to ourselves for how long do we have it? Like 4 hours, I think, 3-4 hours. And we had like our food and like karaoke and things. And I think what was really good about that was it was such like a good bonding experience. Obviously, having done the competitions in itself is already really bonding, and then having the chance to like celebrate that as a team was really, really good. And a lot of people, I just had officer interviews just like 10 minutes ago, and some of the things where I asked them, "Oh, what would you keep about mock trial, like keep going traditions that you would keep?" They're like, "Oh, the team dinner for sure. I'm gonna keep running."
Shawn Mendes went to Punch Bowl one year.
Really? We were talking about how like Leonardo DiCaprio was like at the courtdays like a couple days before.
Yeah, he's like filming, right?
Yeah, he was filming. Something. So he was like filming there like a day after our competition, and then when we came back there for our third round of competition, we were all telling each other, "Guys, you're walking where Leonardo DiCaprio has walked."
Yeah, and speaking of that court, is it courtroom or courthouse?
It's a courthouse, yeah.
Courthouse. So that's in SAC. So assuming that you take on such a big role as president alone, you also have to travel really far and spend hours essentially just at the courthouse. What's it like being able to do something you're immensely passionate about, but it takes up quite a bit of your time, and how are you able to balance everything?
Yeah, well, I mean, the traveling for like the courthouse, luckily it's not super far. It's like 30 minutes, but yeah, we are definitely there for quite some time. But I think when you're passionate about something, it's like worth it in the end. So I know for January especially takes a huge toll on me, just because I'm having back-to-back meetings for mock trial, trying to get our case ready for competitions, and then the competitions in of itself like will take forever. So I'm not getting home until like 10 p.m. every single like competition night, and that on top of my classes, it's definitely pretty difficult. But like I said, it's something that I'm passionate about. Mock trial is one of my top extracurriculars. It's my favorite thing. It's like my baby. This is my club that I like built from the ground up, and knowing that I have to show up for the rest of my members who also love the club as much as I do, it's never going to be like a burden, you know?
Mm-hmm. And speaking about your passions, so this is something that you want to do in the future. What do you specifically see yourself doing in terms of law in the future? Like, where do you plan on going with law?
I don't know about like specifics yet. I think
just as of now.
Yeah, there's such a wide variety of law out there. I was looking specifically at things like entertainment law was super interesting. I shadow an entertainment attorney, so that's kind of where my interests sort of lie, and I enjoy a lot of entertainment ventures from like music and musicals and stuff like that. So that would align with that. But I also am looking at like civil litigation, things like religious and racial injustice. So yeah, one of those two are like my main focuses, but we'll see where I go.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see where you take with that. There's so many different directions. Like, for example, I know that Kim Kardashian is like studying for the bar right now.
Yeah.
I think she failed the first time, but either way, I heard she was really close to passing. So that's pretty cool. And Pete Davidson has a tattoo of Kim Kardashian being a lawyer.
That's crazy. I actually did not know about that.
Yeah. And then we all know Legally Blonde.
Of course, Elle Woods is an icon. Our advertisement last year for mock trial was Elle Woods inspired. It was kind of a cringy commercial now that I like think about it, but it was like her Harvard application video that we did to like recruit people. I don't know if it worked, but yes.
I think it worked. I mean, even if there wasn't like immediate results, look at where your club is now. Like,
yeah, that's so true.
It's pretty good.
Maybe it was all because of that Elle Woods video.
I think it was. I actually think it was. Well, for the listeners listening, and also just people that have never been in the courtroom or know nothing about law, like, what is a typical competition like, and how do you guys like prep for that?
Yeah, so a typical competition, it happens at the courthouse, and so that's at the Gordon D. Shaver County Courthouse in downtown Sacramento, and you would essentially go there. My favorite part about the competitions, okay, one of my favorite parts about the competitions is arriving. And because to me, it's so funny watching all of these teenagers just pull up in their suits and briefcases, and they're like walking and strutting into the courthouse. It's the funniest thing to me, because I'm like, look at all these lawyers look at all these like wannabe lawyers and high school students that are doing this in like their free time. Like, it's just like an existential thing that I'll do every time I arrive there, where I'm like, oh, look at all these people who are like cosplaying lawyers. Yeah. Suits. Just showing up to like the courthouse. Who do they think they are? Meanwhile, I'm doing the same thing. Like, it's so much fun. So yeah, you'll arrive at the courthouse, and all the schools in the Sacramento County, including a few schools that are out of county, since their county doesn't have enough schools to like compete. So it's about like 21 to 22 schools in total that show up at the courthouse, and you know, everyone's there in their suits and ties and whatever else. And you get paired up against schools like against one other school, and then you'll be either prosecution or defense, and then it'll kind of alternate from there. And then you present your like defense case with your defense witnesses on that competition date versus the other school who will bring their prosecution team and their prosecution witnesses. So it's really hard to know what to expect on a day-to-day because each school has like a different way of the like how they built their case. Each of them might have different points that they're going to bring up, and they're always going to have different questions. So a lot of mock trial, while a lot of it is like preparations for the competition, a lot of it is also like, can you improvise on the spot? Especially our witnesses who don't know what questions they're going to be asked by the opposing team's attorneys. They just have to know their statement like front and back and then be ready to answer those questions on the stand. But that is how it works in a real life courtroom anyways, where if you're a witness in a real court, you're not going to know what the other attorney is going to ask you. So it's pretty much exactly how a real trial works. And so competitions, it's really interesting because you have 2 or 3 like scoring judges, and it's always actual attorneys and actual like legal professionals. And so it's always fun when, you know, they're scoring you and they're watching the entire competition, and at the end of the round they always give their feedback and they introduce themselves and they're like, oh, I work in this field of law and here's what I thought about each of your performances. And they're always super nice and they're like, this is like, you guys are going to be running the future of law, and every time I come to these scoring things and I watch all of you guys, I have so much hope for the future. And so they're always super nice, and I know a lot of my teammates love to like go and talk to them and ask more about their careers. So it's also a really cool networking opportunity, especially if you're someone who's interested in law and you want to ask these lawyers what their like career path was like and how they've like gone throughout law school and like what made them interested in law, and you get a lot of feedback, and it's super cool to just be in a courtroom setting, especially if you're interested in law.
Yeah, and recently we had the DUI court assembly.
Yeah, we did.
Which I'm assuming piqued your interest.
It did, yeah. And I mean, the DUI court is nothing like what mock trial is, since that one was just a sentencing. And so the mock trial would have like witnesses and actual questions. But the DUI court was interesting, and it was also, I shadowed a judge at the county courthouse. He actually mentioned it, the judge during the DUI court. He mentioned Judge Williams in Department 2, and that's actually the judge that I shadowed. And he was like, oh, if you ever for some reason drop into Department 2 with Judge Williams, you'll watch like 30 of these. And I was like, I did exactly that. Like during Thanksgiving break, I sat in Judge Williams' courtroom and like watched like 30 of those like DUIs just happen over and over, and they're like, I'm gonna pleading no contest. So
yeah, drop in, but not as a criminal.
Yes, exactly.
Just as a witness. So just to conclude this episode, what advice do you have for people starting their own clubs to pursue their passions, or people just interested in the field of law but they're a little intimidated by it?
Yeah, so I'll start with the club one first. I'd say, like, if you...
what advice do you have for people interested in the field of law, but they're a little intimidated by it, you know, seeing Elle Woods study tremendously for it, which obviously it is a fictional movie, or I guess just being, like, intimidated by it and not really sure what direction they want to take with it?
Yeah, we get that question a lot because I think a lot of people think to be a part of mock trial, you have to have like legal experience. But a lot of our members, actually, I'm pretty sure every single one, obviously doesn't have legal experience. We don't expect you to have legal experience to join mock trial. And I would say like it does seem like pretty intimidating to think about building an entire case. But what's great about mock trial is that it's very introductory, and it's a good like segue into, oh, here's what law is going to be like. And it makes it like very simple, especially when you're going through it like as a team and you have your teacher and attorney coaches. Like we went through all of our objections and went through like direct examinations, and like by the end of it, it kind of almost feels like you know a lot of legal terms, and then you almost don't recognize like how much you're learning even by coming to competitions and watching it, or like watching your teammates compete, or if you're competing yourself and watching these courtrooms happen like over and over. It's exactly what happens in real life as much as it is the high school students that are like performing these. And so you learn a lot about it without even like recognizing. Like it's not like you're sitting down and like studying like a class, like, oh, here are the flashcard terms that I need to know. It's more like as you're putting on the court, as you're, doing these direct examinations, doing these cross examinations, you start to pick up on some things, and you start to pick up on the objections, and you start to pick up on like keywords and like courtroom proceedings. And so it's a very like learning interactive process as opposed to like sitting down and studying. So I think it's not as intimidating as a lot of people think that law is going to be, because definitely that is one of our major questions when I'm at Club Rush, and people are like, oh, I'm kind of like nervous. It's like, there's no need to be nervous. It's going to be a lot of fun. You learn about it with a lot of people.
And you can also be in the same courthouse as Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes, keep that in mind.
Yeah, think about that. Yeah, so thank you for being a guest for today's episode.
Of course, thanks for having me.
And be sure to check out the club's socials, and they meet every Monday in HN1. So once again, thank you to Allison, Joseph, and Mrs. Toyama for making each episode happen, and be sure to check out our socials to leave any suggestions. Peace out, Wildcats.
Bye!